What's going on, everybody? Good to see you all again. Thanks for hanging out here with me. As always, I'm trying to get the phone to go. And there's the ad as usual. Anyhow, folks, I'm glad to be back out here with you. We're having fun. I hope you enjoyed Tuesday's episode. It was a lot of fun to do. We went up to New Jersey. Didn't really find any live bog turtles, but we did find some snapping turtles, and I got to get dirty, which is always fun. So pretty excited about that. It's a nice fall day here in South Florida. It's about 80 degrees, light breeze. I don't know what it's like where you're at, but right around here, it's perfect for reptiles. And today, I'm going to answer a few questions, and then we're going to go ahead and get on into talking and hanging out with Senor Guapo. I guess what this is kind of becoming, guys, it's like the first animal talk show on YouTube. Live talk show. What do you think about that? It's kind of fun to have you all join me here in the little studio. And in the weeks to come, as this thing grows and progresses, I would like to pull in some other animal experts that we can both chat with and ask questions of, and reinforce some of the things that we do on the Tuesday episodes. So we might do an episode with a marine biologist, and we'll have that marine biologist in on Thursday, so you guys can ask questions about that episode. So let's look at some of the questions and say what's up. I just saw someone from Egypt, man. That's awesome. I would love to go to Egypt and go herping and I'll get my Indiana Jones hat and I'll hang out in the pyramids and look for the Well of Souls. You know what I'm talking about, you indie geeks. Poland's on the line. Can Cuban rock iguanas be with a tortoise in the same enclosure? That's a great question, George the Beast. Actually, I keep some cherry head tortoises in with my Cuban rock iguanas. As long as the tortoises are big enough that the Cuban rocks won't harm them, because believe it or not, why don't I just pull him out and then I'll finish my thought. Let's get Guapo out because he really wants to come out and meet everybody. Let's just get right to it, folks. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna pull out Guapo. He made a little poops, but we do have a nice rag here to wipe his bottom. And I'm just going to go ahead and put Guapo right up here and see if he'll hang out with us. He's a very well-behaved boy, and he's gotten so much bigger. I have some hibiscus leaves in case he's interested in eating any of that. So basically, guys, to finish that question about rock iguanas here, I do keep, and he is going to poop, I guarantee it. But anyhow, what's really cool about rock iguanas is they are herbivores. However, they will sometimes make use of animal protein. And if there is a small crab, if there is a baby bird that's fallen out of the nest, a young iguana, if they can easily catch it and eat it, they're going to do that. So you don't want to put a tortoise that is small enough for his powerful jaws to bite and clamp down on. Because guys, these jowls right here on the males, they're actually some muscle in there too, and they have a powerful bite. Rock iguanas, oh God. I'm very nervous about what's going to happen here in a moment because luckily for me, I do have some paper towels. I hope you guys don't mind that I'm a little bit out of sorts this week. So if he poops, we'll wipe it up. You guys can laugh at me and so on. But anyhow, you want to make sure that you're feeding these guys mostly a nice, balanced diet of greens and other vegetation. I use romaine, collard green, mustard green, endive, escarole is a great one. Basically what you would feed a herbivorous, tortoises, you know? So that's why I like rock iguanas, because I don't have to change the diet too much and I don't have to buy different foods, which is cost effective for me when you have so many large animals. Let's see some of these questions. Oh, look at that. Well, there you go. Enjoy the flower, buddy. So every once in a while, he didn't like it. You don't like the flower? Come on, man. Anyhow, let's take a look here. Hello from Hong Kong. Yeah, right on. Does anybody have any questions about the rock iguana? I guess I'll just keep talking about him. So I got Senor Guapo in August of 2004, and he was a small little, kind of a juvenile, little about maybe 2.5, 3 weeks old. And I got him and Lola, and they're really fantastic. Let's pull up another flower for him. So they, in my opinion, the Cyclura iguanas, the rock iguanas, are some of the most fascinating and intelligent lizards out there. They're an impressive looking animal because they have this girth, and they got some strong arms and legs, and they look like beefy little weightlifters of the lizard world. So I got them and I put them out in that enclosure. You guys can go back into some of our videos, and you can see the ones with Guapo, and you see the larger iguana cage that I've built. And these guys do so well, but they were put out there when they were about that big. So they've spent their whole lives outdoors, and how he's become such a tame animal is just because he and I'd go in there and I'd sit with them, I'd feed them, and eventually he realizes that I'm his buddy, that I don't want to hurt him. Let's get a nice close-up if we can. We're going to switch cameras, guys, and I'll answer some questions, I promise. Let's see what we got right now on the FaceTime camera, and you can get a really cool shot. There's a great shot of Guapo. Come here, buddy. Come over here. Let's get the food in front of you folks so you can see him. What does it take to keep them outside all year long? David Jones. David, you're going to want warmth the best you can. What I do is I provide space. You want to make sure that the enclosure is completely enclosed. They can climb. You don't want there to be any predators to get in if they're small. And even at this size, a raccoon could potentially eat him or do some disastrous damage. Raccoons will eat large iguanas in Central America. So I would imagine that it would be similar for a rock iguana if a raccoon came across him. Come here, Guap. So other things you want to make sure that the perimeter of the enclosure that you build is sunk into the ground at least 2 feet. And what I like to do is I put cement around that, wire in the ground, then cement. And you can also take the wire and make an L so that when the animal, this iguana, digs, he digs into a corner and won't dig back and go under. They do burrow. In nature, they live in burrows, and they really like the burrows. And it's a way for them to help thermoregulate, keep things consistent with temperature, because in the Caribbean, they do have some very hot, sunny summer days. Also with the, hey buddy, also with the Caribbean, you know, even though it's in the tropics, some of the area they live is actually quite dry. Almost not quite desert-like, xerotrophic is the word, I believe. And so basically it's hot and dry. They are adaptable. You know, I might give them a mist every once in a while, but being that they live outside, they'll get a little rain, so it's not really necessary. I keep their enclosure filled with some rocks. They don't need to climb very high when they're large. And then keeping them outside here in South Florida, I have the heated shelters with heating pads so that when it gets cold, they are smart. These guys will, instead of using a burrow, they'll use the man-made, what I've made for them as far as a shelter. The name Guapo is Spanish for handsome. I thought he was a handsome dude. Look at his face. I mean, look at how he eats. Is this guy not good looking? Yes, I love you too. He's a really cool, handsome dude. So his name's Mr. Handsome or Senor Guapo. He's really cool. How can I tell he's a boy? Well, the great question, with the male rock iguanas, as they grow, when they're young, you're going to have to probe them, similar to a snake. Move this a little bit. You're going to have to probe them, similar to a snake. The deeper the probe goes, that's where the hemipenes are hidden in the tail. So the deeper you probe, you know you have a male. The shallower the probe goes, you know you have a female. That's when they're young, about 6 to 7 months, you want to do the first probing. But as they mature, it's this funny thing. People always, in the old books that I read growing up, all the old literature would say reptiles are exact replica, the babies are exact replicas of the adults. And that's not true. Because, you know, they do, what's up, bud? They do have differences. They do go through a reptile puberty where they take on the adult characteristics. And so the adult characteristics for the male are these large jowls, a larger dewlap. That's a flap of skin here. It's got a bone here. And he can extend this and he'll bob his head. And that's kind of a way of visual display to talk to potentially, you know, to seduce the gals and to ward off any potential rivals. Also, his spines will become more pronounced as a male. And then at the base of his tail, I'm going to flip him around a little bit. Maybe you guys can see. At the base of his tail, if you look here, that's a bulge. And that's his, well, that's his man junk, to be honest. You know, lizards and snakes have what's called hemipenes. And hemipenes basically are it's two penises. So they're running around with two. Where most everyone else is running around with one. So it's pretty incredible, the lizard here. So this is Senor Guapo, and he's got these really cool, pretty eyes. And, you know, I've said this in some of my other videos. but on top of his head, I guess I can maybe move the computer. If you guys can look up on top of the head, I'm going to do the best I can, guys. Right there, that is his third eye, or pineal eye. And that goes to the pineal gland inside the brain. And that basically is there to help him thermoregulate. He's able to figure out if it's hot. It is an eye. It doesn't have, it's not a seeing eye, but it does operate like an eye. And it has a lens, and it tells light and dark, and it can also sense heat. And that lets him know when it's time to get out of the sun. So that's a really cool adaptation that most lizards have, the third eye. It's a really impressive animal, though, the Cuban rock iguana. Now, he's 13 years old. I guess maybe I'll, man, let's see. Maybe I will go back to the other view. I don't know. You guys are getting to see his box that he comes in. Let's go back to the other view, and we'll switch back, and I'll answer some questions. And, we'll keep on rapping. Good deal. All right, guys, thank you so much for bearing with me. I'm going to put him sideways so everybody can kind of get a better look. Someone asked, how big do rock iguanas get? This is his full size for Guapo, okay? I have seen much larger rock iguanas. The rhinos get fairly large. I had a large female rhino who almost dwarfs Guapo. She passed away. Her name was Azul. And she was a really cool animal, but she got egg-bound. Not quite egg-bound. She actually laid her eggs, but she held them so long that she did internal damage, and it was quite sad. But, you're looking at about 4.5, 5 foot is going to be the max length for the rock iguanas. Some of them, like the Figgins eye iguana, are going to stay smaller. Some of the Cyclura iguanas from the Bahamas stay smaller. But the Cubans, the Brax, the Cayman Island Brack iguana, and the rhino iguanas, they get larger. They're a beefier animal. And maybe you know this, maybe you don't. I'm just going to tell you. These were the largest land animals on their islands in the Caribbean before European settlers came. And, as you know, the Europeans came and they brought their cats and dogs. They brought rats as well. They also brought goats. So cats and dogs would decimate the adult and young populations of the iguanas, making it harder for them to reproduce. And then the rats would decimate the eggs and potentially the offspring. And goats would outcompete these animals for the same food source. Goats are warm-blooded, high metabolism, and they're going to eat faster than these guys. And goats, as you know, or maybe you don't know, I've got a neighbor with goats. People will actually rent the goats out to denude. That's a big word. It's a small word with a big meaning. Denude means to make bare their land. They'll eat all kinds of foliage and, well, they'll eat anything pretty much. So they'll outcompete our buddies here for the same food source. Let's turn to some questions right now. How often do they need feeding? Alfie Evans, good question. I feed my rock iguanas every other day. They'll get Monday, Wednesday, and then Friday, and then a little bit on the weekend. Again, in captivity, I always yield, this is species specific, but with rock iguanas, you don't, or I don't feed every day. That's just how I do it. I do know some breeders that do feed every day. Ty Park, who I really enjoy talking with, and his knowledge is vast. He feeds his every day, sometimes twice a day. But I know most other folks, they feed them a little bit every day or on a once every other day schedule. Let's see. Is it very common to become egg-bound? Genevieve Sanders, great question. It can be if the conditions for the animal aren't proper. They know what they need to lay eggs. They want a specific moisture in the soil. They want a specific depth. They want a type of soil. And so it's our job when we have these animals in captivity to try and figure them out, which can be maddening. So with the particular animal that I had a problem with Azul, she had laid eggs before, but for whatever reason, she just didn't like the setup that year for her. And so she held the eggs, and you could see the lump of eggs, and I was really getting stressed out. Finally, I made a nest box for her, and she went in and she laid her eggs. But unfortunately, I think, and this was between the vet and I just hypothesizing, is that because the eggs were in there so long, it put a lot of stress on her internal organs. And it was an actual fat body that prolapsed out of her cloaca. It was very, very sad for me because I had that animal for many years. She was also just an incredibly beautiful rhino. She had horns off of her cheeks. She had multi-horns on her nose. She was really a magnificent animal. So losing her was horrible. But my recommendation is if you're going to keep a lizard, a tortoise, any egg-laying reptile, make sure you have nest boxes or soil that is of adequate depth, and always try and figure out what the animal wants. Is it crumbly? Is it too wet? It needs to be kind of in that Goldilocks zone of being just right. And there you go. I knew it. Big old cyclura poop coming your way, folks. And this is what they do. And it's kind of funny. Actually, these guys are pretty clean. You'll notice that, oh boy, he's got a bit of diarrhea today. That's no bueno. I hope that's nothing bad. So this is also something important, guys. You got to watch your animals poop. You got to see what their stool's like. You want it to be solid. So it's got a little bit more of a loose stool, but here comes some solid stuff. So I'm going to want to keep an eye on that. And I actually have a microscope that I was taught by my friend Sam Pascucci how to look for worms and other pathogens or parasites that are inside. It's kind of bizarre. I'm staring at him while he poops. Sorry, buddy. But sometimes I can take a sample and I'll go ahead and make sure that there's no parasites. And if there are parasites, we would do a dewormer and some kind of anti-microbe, anti-parasitic situation there. So let's clean them up. And there'll be a little bit more of this stuff. But that's what's going on today here at the camp. Hold on. Put it over here. Let's see. You guys got any more questions while I'm cleaning poop? Let's see. What's the most challenging part of taking care of Guapo? Well, you know, guys, there's the most challenging part isn't really the care, because I did my homework and these animals grew as I grew. So I got them when they were small. I built the big enclosure. So that's the most challenging part, is preparing yourself for a large lizard. You want to make sure that this guy is, excuse me, you want to make sure this guy's got the right habitat and that he's not, you know, cooped up. You want them to be able to move around and be active. It's better for everything. So I would say for me, the most challenging part was making sure that I had the right habitat for these animals. And then another challenging part is making sure I don't get so crazy about animals that I hoard and buy animals. Don't do that. Stop. Focus on a species you like and then work with those and do the best you can for them. Let's see, what else? Hey, what's up from India, Kasinik? I'm sorry if I said that wrong. What would I recommend is a tortoise? Let's see, not a big tortoise. I don't know. You probably want a Greek tortoise or a Herman's tortoise. I'm trying to stay specific on lizards today. Let's see, how would you go about healing a cut on the back of your Russian tortoise neck? I can't help you there. You're going to have to go to a vet. Topical antibiotic to start with. That would be the first thing. First aid, basic first aid, guys. Clean the wound with betadine, diluted betadine, and then you would probably apply a triple antibiotic if the cut isn't too big. Herping rascals, good question. Has Guapo ever bitten you? No. They can bite. There are different personalities on these animals, different temperaments, but this animal has never once, not once, opened his mouth in any kind of defensiveness or aggression to me. And that's why, you know, when I do have some private visitors that are friends of mine that come over the house, I always let them come in and pet Guapo, because he's just like really great animal. I trust him very much. That being said, I always give people the, you know, touch him back here, always like allow him to see your hand coming up, never approach from the top. And also, guys, cyclura are going to give you a lot of visual cues. So here's a very important thing if you have a cyclura iguana, and what I've found out. So if this animal's agitated, or furthermore, actually, let's pet him and see if he does it. This is kind of a submissive kind of stance, okay? So Guapo's just kind of relaxed. He's letting me hang out. Other times when I scratch him, he's going to raise up and he'll keep his tail. If you see, he'll keep the tip of his tail down. You guys see that? All right, now if he were agitated, and I've gone in with some of the rhinos, if he were agitated, he'd stand up, but he'd have this tail up off the ground. And that's just so he can give you a whack. He'd have his tail up off the ground and he'd be bobbing his head. But if he's just like this, no problem. So visual cues is what they do. Mouth opening. They're warning off other animals. They'll open their mouths real wide and show the other males, look at how big my mouth is. I'll bite you. And to be honest, Guapo has sustained a couple of little lost digits from his girlfriend, Lola. Every once in a while, there is a skirmish. And years ago, they had a skirmish. And sometimes they can be quite violent. And he's missing a couple toes. You see that? So that was from a little argument he had with Lola. And if the enclosure wasn't big enough, the more dominant or aggressive animal could have potentially killed the other one. So it's important that we keep an eye on our animals, especially when you're introducing new animals to each other. You never want to leave them alone. You always want to kind of make sure that you are there to referee any potential drama. Let's see, what other questions do we have here? Does a human first aid kit serve lizards? Yes, it can. Would I have a savanna monitor? I like them. I've had them before. I'd held them for bush wildlife until we found them homes. Does my pond ever shrink? Well, yeah, it loses water from time to time. We just fill it back up. Handler on a return, probably time. You guys are going fast. These animals have any defensive tactics, or do they have any natural predators? Great question, Jojo. They do have defensive tactics, a couple of them. It's really cool. Just because you're a herbivore doesn't mean you're a wimp, right? First off, they're powerful. When they reach full size, they can bite you pretty good. They can remove a finger for sure. So they're not something that doesn't possess a powerful bite. Also, the spines here. If he wanted to, he can make them stand erect. He can keep these straight up, and they are actually sharp. I went to go grab a rhino, and I cut my hands because she tensed up. And those spines, they don't only look good, they actually can provide some protection. They have their defensive scaly skin, which is always a help. And then something that I didn't mention about the tail, they also have caudal autonomy where they can drop their tails as a defense when they're young. Even as adults, they can do it. But that's like a last-ditch effort for these large lizards. But they can drop their tails. The new tail is never quite as pretty, but that's another defensive tactic. The tail itself is the characteristic of the tail on the Cyclura iguana is what gives them the name Cyclura. Cyclura is Latin for circular, and they have a circular tail, and they have these spines on their tails. They have spines right here, and they're facing towards the back of the animal. So they'll go inside their burrow, and they'll take their tail and wedge it against the side of the burrow. And if you try and extricate them from the burrow, it's not happening because these spines grip like you wouldn't believe the side of the burrow. So that's another defensive tactic. They are built, so they're natural predators. There are birds of prey that eat them. That was pretty much it. Birds of prey, different birds, crabs would get juveniles, a lot of egg predation. But once they get to that size on the island, the islands before Europeans, the native peoples would eat them. So they were a predator of these animals. But by and large, once they got to a big enough size, they're not going to be predated by any other animals on those islands as they were the largest animals on their islands. So great question. Thank you for asking that. That was really good. Let's see. He's got his nail there. Let's see. Do they lay eggs like geckos? No, they don't lay two at a time. In fact, these guys can lay upwards. They can lay over 10 eggs. I got 14 eggs out of a juvenile rhino iguana. So clutch size depends on how many ovaries the animal has, how many follicles in her she has. Just because she lays 14 eggs doesn't mean all 14 will hatch, but usually they do. They hatch in about 3 months. I have some eggs cooking right now that are close to hatching, so I'm going to leave them alone. They are rhino eggs. And as far as getting an animal like this as a pet, just know you're going to need a lot of space, habitat enrichment, the proper thermal climates. These guys will bask in about 120 degrees. They really need high temperatures to digest that food. So this is not an animal for an apartment up north. This is an animal that you're going to want to have outside and to live in the southern climate. You can do what I do. Just move to Florida, and everything gets a whole lot easier and better for you and the animals. Let's see. Any other questions? Hello, Fahad from Saudi Arabia. Thank you for joining me, man. Let's see, what's the average lifespan? Good question, Nicholas. The average lifespan on Cyclura is actually quite long-lived. 30 to 40 years, sometimes 50 years for these animals. So that's really cool because we know that Guapo is 13 years old. So I'll have Guapo for hopefully another 30 years. And it's amazing when you can spend, the rest of your life with your reptilian friend. That's why I love tortoises and I love these Cyclura iguana because they are so long-lived and they are vegetarian. They are herbivores, so it makes it easy for me to care for them because I can grow a lot of food here. So that's really neat. Let's see, guys. The pet loving freak. Shout out. There you go. All right. There's always dormant and I'm about more. No, right now it's a little bit cooler today. When I picked Guapo up, he was basking, but he didn't quite raise his temperature up. So he's a little cool. And he's kind of chill, man. He's my lounge lizard. And he's just hanging out. He's in a new spot. He's tasting the ground. He's been here before. He's done different school programs with me when we do live school programs. So he knows the drill. He's just kind of hanging out. He's a well-behaved animal. It's just one of those mysteries. Like, it's not that he's dormant. He's just super chilled out right now. If I had a heat lamp on him and he raised his temperature, he'd be off exploring, definitely, to see what's going on. They're inquisitive. Do I put my animals in my will? That's a good question. You got to write that. And yes, I do have some really have to think about the future, and there are things I'm doing with my animals for sure. Let's see here, guys. Do I breed? I do. Motherly Love NRG. Do you breed any animals to assist with conservation efforts? I do. There are animals that I'm breeding with the TSA, the Turtle Survival Alliance, and the Turtle and Tortoise Preservation Group. You can visit them. Google Turtle and Tortoise Preservation Group and Turtle Survival Alliance, and also the Turtle Conservancy. Google those names. They're great organizations that I work with, and there are private keepers like myself. We're going to be filming an episode on the Batagur affinis turtles. We did the pig-nosed pond build, and that title was kind of misleading. The pond was built for the Batagur, but I had to have a turtle put in it, and I didn't have the Batagur at that time, so we put the Fly River turtle in that pond, or the pig-nosed turtle. But that pond was built because Dallas, Fort Worth Zoo, San Diego, and Bronx Zoo had animals, the Batagur affinis, very large freshwater turtles from Southeast Asia, that they needed to put in an outdoor area to help them stimulate breeding. So I'm hoping that happens. And what happens when I breed an animal from zoos is basically all the offspring belong to the zoo, and we then decide where to place them, or the zoos decide where to place those animals. So that's what we're doing. We create what's called assurance colonies to keep these animals going. These particular animals, Cuban rock iguanas and rhino iguanas, are fairly common now, and that's because in the States they are being bred in great numbers, and so we don't have to worry about taking them from their natural habitat. We'd love to see that with some other West Indian rock iguanas because they are not doing as well. And if we can get these animals into private hands, breed them, we will create assurance colonies for these animals as well. So very, very important. That's what Ty Park is trying to do with his efforts, and basically his whole operation by selling lizards is basically funding itself, and whatever profits he makes, he sends to different lizard conservation projects across the globe, which is really admirable. So that's why we like Ty, and I always give him a hard time because he gives me a hard time. I like that guy though. All right, do we need authorization for this animal? And yes, how much does it cost? Hello from France. Georges, I do not know the laws in France. I'll bet there is some kind of international trade on these animals. So, you've got to look into your own country. In the United States, I can have this animal as long as it was bred in the United States. So if its parents bred in the United States, I can have it. I only have a Class 3 license from Florida Fish and Wildlife that allows me to do commercial activity with my animals, i.e. these education, or if I sell babies, I have that permit. Okay. Let's see. Oh, it's 4:29. A couple more questions, and I'm going to move. And the one I have a Cuban rock iguana, but no one has one. Where can I get them? Matthew, I would tell you to look at Ty Park, Typark. Look him up on Facebook. He has a lot of beautiful animals, and he breeds a lot of Cuban iguanas, a lot of different rock iguanas. So that would be the first person I check. If you like rhino iguanas, you should also talk to Starborn Reptiles. You can Google them and look for them on Facebook. Starborn, but it's B-O-R-N, okay? Starborn Reptiles. They do a lot of great work with animals, and they're friends of mine as well. Let's see. Turtle Tanks, you've been asking this question. Hey, Kenan, what tortoises are good for life in Canada? Small ones, Greeks, elongateds, Hermans, Russians, animals you can care for easily inside, because Canada is pretty much the Arctic in my eyes. Anything north of Orlando is southern Canada. I'm just teasing. You're going to want to do that. Would I keep a Gaboon Viper? I don't want to keep venomous animals. That's just not what, I love going out, finding them. I love all that, but it's such a big responsibility. And gosh, I don't want that responsibility, to be perfectly honest. Now, I do work with some of the venomous animals over at Bush Wildlife. I assist David Hitzig in cleaning the enclosures, and I get my thrill that way, and I get to help out and learn about them. But, living here in this community, I just don't want to do it. I don't think it's not, I think if you have the right permits and you're responsible, so be it. That's fine. But it's not something for everyone. All right, guys, let's see. If you had a chance for a marine iguana, would I make it cool? No, I wouldn't. Marine iguana is going to be incredibly difficult to do. They would require thousands of gallons of fresh seawater. They also only eat seaweed. It would be logistically a nightmare. They are better off just left in the Galapagos. That's it. Let's see. What is the perfect breeding age? These animals, good question, Tad Baker. These animals can breed at about 3 years old. However, I would wait till they're about 5 or 6 years old, where they have a little bit larger size, because as we talked about earlier, you don't want to stress the insides of that female out. So it's very important to make sure that they're of proper size and they've grown and matured enough to safely reproduce, because reproduction is a tough thing. Even for humans, years and years ago, before our medical advances, having a baby could be a very dangerous proposition for a woman, and many women died in childbirth. Many infants died as soon as they were born. So birth is a very stressful part of the life process sometimes. All right, when's the next episode of Touch My Snake coming out? Because I enjoyed the one with Travis Pastrana. Good question, Kyle. Well, we're going to have more, definitely. It's when we find interesting people that are terrified of snakes. So that will be coming, quarterly. We'll do 2 or 3 of them a quarter and a few of them a year. So hang tight. There'll be more. I appreciate you guys liking that one. Really just want to say thank you also to everybody joining in on these live broadcasts. It's a lot of fun, man. We're really trying to grow the channel. And I'm asking all of you guys out there, if you really like what you're seeing, if you enjoy this, please share it all across any social media platforms. It really means a lot when you guys do that. We thank you. And to all my international friends that have been asking about t-shirts, we have our t-shirts. We've been shipping in the States. Thank you for everyone who's bought one. There are some left, and we really appreciate that. To my friends overseas, I know people from the Philippines, Australia, UK, Canada, we are now currently working on an international shipping rate. We will have that figured out. Please bear with us as we're learning how to create the store and get everything dialed in. Once we get this machine oiled, we'll be humming right along, and I appreciate your guys' help. That's going to do it for the live broadcast, man. It's 4:33. I like to keep these at about a half an hour, because if you're hanging out on your phone, you don't want to be staring at it for longer than that. And I hope you guys enjoyed Guapo. Every week we're going to try something new, okay? It's free flowing. I might have a reptile or animal luminary here with me. It's going to be a good time. Thursdays, 4 o'clock. I'm Kenan Harkin. I appreciate you guys hanging out. I'll be seeing you again real soon. I hope I got to a lot of your questions. Very cool, man. Thank you so much for joining. Now I know I have to go. You're screaming no, but I got to go. I got to rake poop. I got to feed animals. I got to put him back. And it all has to be done before it gets dark. So it's a one-man operation over here, guys. Thank you so very much for joining me on this half-hour live broadcast. We'll see you again. When do I see it? Next Thursday, 4 o'clock. And Sunday, a new bonus episode. Hang tight. Tuesdays, Kamp Kenan Show, full episodes. I'm signing off. Thanks, guys. Later, Guap. Later, everyone. So long.